Can you even imagine it? The Grand Council chamber of the Galactic Concordant floated like a radiant beacon in the endless void of space, its massive crystalline walls shimmering with the reflected glow of 1,000 stars, each one a silent witness to the drama unfolding within. As I, Ambassador KRX of the Uterine Empire, settled into my hover seat, my eyes were drawn to the glaringly empty section where the human delegates should have been. Not that anyone expected them to show up. Not after the devastation on New Montana. The air crackled with tension, like a storm brewing in the cosmos. What had we done to push them so far? Order. Order in the chamber. High Chancellor Vex's voice thundered through the cavernous space, his four forearms raised in that commanding gesture we all recognized as a call to attention. We're here to discuss the so-called incident involving the human response to the Drade operation. I had to stifle a bitter laugh, earning a sharp glare from Ambassador PTO of the Unified Hives. Incident? Seriously? When a Drachnid battle fleet gets reduced to cosmic rubble, they dare call it an incident. The audacity was almost laughable. Vexa pressed on, his scaled skin shifting from a calm green to a nervous purple, betraying his unease. The humans have issued what they're calling a final notice of grievance. Ambassador KRX, would you please read their communication for the Council? Of course, it's always me. Why wouldn't it be? My species is one of the few that can pronounce human words without a translator's aid, so I'm stuck with the uncomfortable tasks. I pulled up the holographic document, cleared my throat, and steadied my trembling voice. To the Galactic Concordant and all associated species, I began, the words ringing out in the vast chamber. For 300 standard cycles, humanity has participated in good faith within your governmental framework. We've endured trade restrictions that strangled our outer colonies, leaving them gasping for resources. We've watched helplessly as you carved up our expansion zones like a galactic feast. We've suffered under your so-called protective scientific oversight that's chained our research and development to the ground. Murmurs erupted, a wave of discomfort sweeping through the council. I raised my voice, letting the humans' anguish fuel my words. But the unprovoked attack on New Montana? That crosses a line that can never be undone. You've mistaken our patience for weakness, our diplomacy for fear, our restraint for powerlessness. I paused, my gaze sweeping over the council members, who shifted uneasily in their seats. Could they feel the weight of their actions? Consider this humanity's resignation from the Concordant, effective immediately. Any species that dares stand between us and justice for New Montana will be considered hostile. You have 24 standard hours to choose your side. Choose wisely. The chamber exploded into chaos. Trade Minister Zill of the Commerce Worlds fainted, her crystalline form chiming like delicate glass as her attendants rushed to catch her. The hive representatives filled the air with their frantic clicking, a sound like a swarm of enraged insects. And through it all, High Chancellor Vexa just sat there, his four hands clasped tightly, his scales now a sickly white. Was he even comprehending the gravity of this moment? Surely, Ambassador P's clicking voice cut through the pandemonium. The humans know their place. They're just one species among hundreds. Their military is a mere speck compared to our combined fleet. I couldn't hold it in. I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that echoed in the stunned silence that followed. Did they really not see it? I had to make them understand. My esteemed colleagues, I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm so thick it could choke a star. Has it ever occurred to any of you that the humans chose this moment to send their message? That maybe, just maybe, they've spent these 300 cycles preparing for exactly this day? The silence that followed was deafening, heavy with the weight of their ignorance. Were they finally waking up? The quiet stretched, oppressive and suffocating, as I pulled up historical records on my neural display. I didn't need them. Every diplomat worth their title knew the 3 breaking points that led us to this catastrophe. But we'd ignored them, dancing on the edge of a neutron star like reckless fools. Perhaps, I suggested, rising from my hover seat with a dramatic flourish, we should revisit how we stumbled into this disastrous mess, starting with the Parius embargo. High Chancellor Vexa gave a weary nod, his scales dull with resignation. Even he couldn't deny how utterly foolish that decision was. The embargo was supposedly to protect developing species in the Parius arm from humanity's aggressive economic moves. What a sham. In truth, It was the commerce worlds guarding their precious monopoly on quantum crystalline computing, hoarding wealth while others suffered. The humans submitted 17 separate proposals to adjust the embargo. I continued, watching my colleagues squirm like they were sitting on thorns, each one more reasonable than the last. But no, Trade Minister Zill and her beloved commerce worlds had to protect their profit margins at all costs. The greed was staggering. A harsh laugh burst from my throat, echoing in the chamber. And then, the mass starvation on New Montana, New Texas, and 5 other human colonies, cut off from their supply lines like abandoned children. The humans begged for emergency aid. We said no. They pleaded for temporary exemptions. We said no. They asked to relocate their starving citizens. We said no. Can you even imagine the desperation, the hopelessness they must have felt? Ambassador P's mandibles clicked irritably, his arrogance infuriating. The law must be upheld. The law. I snapped, cutting him off with a venomous glare. Let's talk about the Beta Carina incident, shall we? When the combined fleet declared human expansion zones as sanctuaries for space-dwelling lithoids. How convenient that those same lithoids were cleared out 5 cycles later to make way for Drachnid colony ships. The hypocrisy was maddening. Supreme Commander Rudel, the Drade representative, shot to his feet, his bioluminescent patches flaring like warning beacons. Those accusations were never proven. Oh, sit down, Rudel. I barked, my patience gone. We all saw the footage. Humans terraformed 3 planets in that sector, poured 60 cycles of blood, sweat, and tears into building cities and farms. Then, out of nowhere, your survey ships discover critically endangered crystal breathers in that exact sector? Please, the nerve of it was almost too much to bear. The chamber dissolved into a storm of angry shouts and accusations, voices clashing like a discordant symphony. I let them rage, their fury filling the air, before triggering the sonic dampeners in my section. In the sudden, artificial quiet, I accessed more records, my heart's pounding with indignation. But the scientific censorship, I continued, my voice steady now. That was our crowning act of idiocy. When humans developed their first functional quantum consciousness transfer system, what did we do? The Science Council, in its infinite arrogance, declared it too dangerous for an immature species and demanded they abandon it. High Chancellor Vex's scales shifted to a deep blue, tinged with remembered shame. The technology had significant risks. Risks? I roared, my throat sacs inflating with fury. The technology worked. It was light years beyond anything our species had ever achieved. But instead of collaborating, we chose to crush their progress. When Dr. Elena Martinez refused to destroy her research, the Science Council sent in enforcement units. 10 human scientists died in that raid. Can you fathom the tragedy, the loss of those brilliant minds? The newer council members gasped, their eyes wide with shock. That dark chapter was conveniently buried in the official records. The humans went quiet after that, I said, my voice softening, heavy with regret. Too quiet. They played by our rules, smiled at our diplomatic functions. But if any of you had paid attention, I gestured to the holographic displays of human space, glowing with data. Their shipping manifests never matched their production numbers. Their energy consumption was always just a bit higher than reported. Their colonies kept growing, defying all our restrictions. How did we miss the signs? Trade Minister Zill, now recovered from her fainting spell, raised a trembling crystalline appendage, her voice quivering. Are you saying they've been deceiving us? No, I replied, sinking back into my hover seat, exhausted by their blindness. I'm saying it's a fact. Humans have a saying, hope for the best, plan for the worst. For 300 cycles, we've given them nothing but the worst, and trust me, they've been planning for it. The chamber fell silent again, the weight of my words sinking in like a black hole's pull. All those years of restrictions, vetoes, and suppression, we thought we were taming a dangerous species. Instead, we were handing them time to sharpen their claws, to build in secret, to plan their retribution. And now, with the ashes of New Montana still smoldering, we'd pushed them beyond their breaking point. What had we unleashed? The holographic display at the chamber's center flared to life, revealing the heartbreaking ruins of New Montana. 3 days after the Drachnid attack, fires still raged across the vast wheat fields, a testament to the unimaginable destruction. The massive agricultural domes lay shattered, their broken shells strewn across the landscape like the bones of some ancient, fallen giant. The sight tore at my hearts. How could we have allowed such a tragedy? Play the footage, I demanded, my voice raw with emotion, trembling with the weight of what we were about to witness. My colleagues flinched, their eyes darting nervously. They knew what was coming, and it wasn't going to be pretty. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing New Montana's orbital defense platforms hanging silent in the void of space, powered down as concordant law demanded. Then, without warning, the Drade fleet erupted from hyperspace. 47 capital ships, a merciless armada of destruction. No warning, no demands, just immediate, overwhelming force that shook me to my core. Can you imagine the terror on that planet? Stop! Supreme Commander Rudel protested, his voice quivering with desperation. We all know what happened. No, I snarled, my throat sacs pulsing with fury. You will watch. Every single one of you will watch this horror. The Drade ships opened fire, their energy weapons slicing molten scars across New Montana's surface, each beam a wound on the planet's heart. Kinetic bombardment rounds smashed through the atmospheric shields, striking cities with the force of small nuclear weapons. 7 million humans, 7 million, perished in the first hour alone. How do you even comprehend such a loss? The chamber was silent, the weight of those deaths pressing down on us all. But that wasn't what broke us. No, it was something far crueler. Look, I said, highlighting specific ships in the display, my voice shaking with indignation. Notice how the Drade fleet deliberately targeted the agricultural domes. Not military bases, not factories. They went straight for the food production facilities, the very means to feed a population. The callousness of it was staggering. Why would they do such a thing? To starve a people into submission? The recording pressed on, each moment more gut-wrenching than the last. Emergency beacons lit up the night side of the planet, desperate cries for help as civilian ships tried to flee. The Drachnid fleet shot them down. Not all, but enough to prove their dominance, enough to send a chilling message that echoed across the stars. My heart ached at the sight. How could we have let this happen? 17 hours. I continued, my throat sacs constricting with barely contained rage, each word a struggle. For 17 agonizing hours, human ships across 3 sectors received distress calls from New Montana. Cries for help we were legally forbidden from answering because of the Concordant's quarantine protocols. Can you imagine the torment of hearing those pleas and being powerless to act? High Chancellor Vexa raised all 4 hands, his scales trembling. The protocols exist to prevent conflict escalation, he said weakly, as if that could justify the tragedy. The protocols? I cut him off, my voice dripping with scorn. They exist to shield aggressors like the Drades from facing consequences. But here's what you've all missed. The humans obeyed those protocols for 17 hours while their people died. They followed your precious laws, even as their world burned. I switched the display to current sensor readings, my heart's pounding with a mix of dread and awe. Then, exactly 18 hours after the first shot was fired, every human military vessel in known space activated drive systems we didn't even know existed and vanished. The chamber erupted in alarmed murmurs, a wave of panic rippling through the council. Vanished? How could that be? Ambassador P's antennae twitched nervously, his voice high with fear. Vanished where? That's the chilling part, I replied, unable to keep a note of dark admiration from creeping into my voice. According to our best sensor data, they didn't go anywhere. They just stopped being detectable. 5,000 ships, gone, like they'd never existed. The impossibility of it sent shivers down my spine. What kind of power could achieve such a feat? Trade Minister Zill's crystalline form vibrated with anxiety, her voice trembling. Impossible. Our detection systems are being outwitted by technology we didn't even know existed. I finished for her, my words sharp as a blade. Just like we didn't know about their fleet's true capabilities. Just like we didn't know about their actual industrial capacity. Just like we didn't know about the massive military fortress buried 2 kilometers beneath New Montana's surface. That got their attention. I triggered another holographic display, this one showing deep scan readings of New Montana, captured just before our sensor platforms mysteriously failed. See that? I pointed to a colossal structure hidden beneath the planet's crust, my voice rising with urgency. While we were all busy congratulating ourselves on keeping humanity contained, they built a fortress right under our noses. One that survived the bombardment. One that, according to our last readings, was launching ships. The council gasped, their eyes wide with shock. How had we been so blind? But that's not the worst part. I continued, my voice dropping to a grim whisper, saving the most terrifying revelation for last. The worst part is what happened 6 hours ago. Anyone want to take a guess? Silence filled the chamber, thick and suffocating. I let it stretch, watching my colleagues squirm in their seats, their fear palpable. Every human in known space disappeared. Not just soldiers, every single human. Trading posts, diplomatic missions, research stations, civilian contractors, all empty. 3 billion humans across 700 systems, gone in an instant. The implications hit the council like a plasma blast, a collective gasp echoing through the chamber. 3 billion? Gone. How? High Chancellor Vex's scales turned almost white, his voice barely a whisper. That's not possible. The energy requirements alone, quantum consciousness transfer. I said quietly, the realization hitting me like a comet. Remember that technology we forced them to abandon? Turns out they didn't abandon it. They perfected it. And now we have no idea where humanity's population has gone, where their fleet is, or what they're planning. The chamber was deathly still, the council grappling with the enormity of it all. What had we unleashed? I stood, my gaze locking onto each council member's sensory organs, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. But we do know one thing. In the last transmission from New Montana, before the Drachnid fleet opened fire, Governor Chen said something to her people. The humans preserved that recording for us, a final message of defiance. I played the clip, and Governor Chen's voice, calm and resolute despite the approaching doom, filled the chamber. Remember the Alamo. The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. None of our xenohistorians could decode it. I said, watching comprehension dawn on my colleagues' faces. Until now. It's from human military history. It means they're about to make someone pay dearly for their mistake. And oh, how they would pay. The chamber's emergency alerts chose that moment to scream to life. Red warning holograms flashing like blood across the air. Reports flooded in from every corner of known space. Human ships appearing from nowhere, striking strategic targets with surgical precision, broadcasting one message on all frequencies. Humanity thanks the Galactic Concordant for its patience. Now, sit back and observe how warfare should be conducted. The words sent a chill through me. Were we ready for what was coming? The council chamber dissolved into panic, the alerts relentless. Supreme Commander Rudel barked orders into his neural link, his bioluminescent patches pulsing with frantic energy. Drachnid Fleet Base Omega 7 gone. Just gone. His voice cracked, raw with disbelief. 300 ships, 50,000 personnel, turned into elementary particles within a 50-kilometer radius. I checked my own updates, my heart's racing. They call it the Manhattan Protocol. They've had that weapon ready for 3 decades, waiting for the right moment. Rudel's facial tentacles writhed in distress, his voice a wail. Our shields can't stop a weapon that rewrites the fundamental forces holding matter together. Doesn't it make you wonder? I interrupted, a grim satisfaction in my tone. What else did they develop while we thought they were playing by our rules? High Chancellor Vex's scales had turned a sickly gray I'd never seen before, his voice trembling. The combined fleet is mobilizing. We have numerical superiority. A new alert cut him off, the massive holographic display showing the Drachnid home system, or rather, its ruins. The mighty defense ring of 50,000 automated weapons platforms was now floating debris, a graveyard in space. The supposedly impregnable planetary shield had been felled by a human computer virus that slipped past every security measure. Oh look, I commented dryly, unable to resist. Humanity remembered your tricks from the Beta Carina incident. How thoughtful of them to return the favor. Ambassador P's mandibles clacked wildly, his panic palpable. But the human fleet can't possibly. They don't have the numbers to be everywhere at once. I brought up another tactical display, my voice sharp. They don't need to be. See these patterns? Classic human military doctrine, vertical envelopment, tactical mobility, force multiplication. They're not trying to hold territory. They're destroying strategic targets and vanishing before we can blink. The chamber shook, not a simulation this time, a real impact. I checked the external cameras, my eyes widening. The Commerce World's prized defense fleet was locked in combat, with 3 human warships directly above the council chamber. And the humans were winning. Fascinating. I mused, my gaze glued to the battle. Their ships are pulling maneuvers that should tear them apart. The energy readings are off the charts. It's like they're defying the laws of physics. Impossible. Trade Minister Zill's crystalline form resonated with terror, her voice a high-pitched whine. Our scientists swore humans couldn't advance beyond our technological level. I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. Did it ever occur to you that they let us believe that? That every advancement they showed was a carefully crafted lie to keep us complacent? Another explosion lit up the space above us, and I watched in awe as one human ship duplicated itself. Then both copies duplicated again. The Commerce World's fleet now faced 12 identical warships instead of 3. Quantum duplication. I explained to my stunned colleagues, my voice tinged with dark admiration. Another technology we deemed too dangerous for them to develop. Starting to see a pattern here? The chamber was a cacophony of alarms and fear, the council grappling with the reality of humanity's wrath. What had we done to provoke such a reckoning? For 300 cycles, we'd underestimated them, suppressed them, and now we were paying the price. The humans weren't just fighting. They were teaching us a lesson we'd never forget. And as the alerts screamed and the battle raged above, I couldn't help but wonder, what else did they have in store? Can you believe it? Supreme Commander Rudel went rigid as a starship hull, his neural link buzzing frantically with priority transmissions that seemed to choke the air itself. The human fleet, his voice faltered, cracking under the weight of what he couldn't bring himself to say. Let me guess. I cut in, my own updates flashing across my neural display, each one a gut punch. They just appeared in every major system simultaneously. Military bases, shipyards, command centers, all under attack at the exact same moment. How could they coordinate such a strike? The precision was terrifying. The council chamber fell deathly silent, save for the piercing wail of alarms and the distant, ominous rumble of battles echoing through the stars. I stood, straightening my diplomatic robes with a flourish, my heart's pounding with a mix of dread and awe. You know what's really fascinating? I asked, my gaze sweeping over my terrified colleagues. Their faces a mosaic of fear and disbelief. They're being selective, precise. They're only hitting military targets, only targeting species that backed the Drades. They're not even touching civilian traffic. Can you imagine such control in the midst of chaos? High Chancellor Vexa found his voice, though it trembled like a leaf in a cosmic storm. They're showing restraint. No, I corrected, my voice sharp as a plasma blade. They're showing us exactly how much restraint they've been practicing for the past 300 cycles. And what happens when that restraint finally snaps? The realization hit the council like a meteor, each member grappling with the truth. We'd pushed humanity too far, and now we were reaping the consequences of our arrogance. The next 6 hours in the council chamber felt like witnessing a masterclass in warfare, a spectacle both horrifying and mesmerizing. Trade Minister Zill had shattered herself in a panic an hour ago, her crystalline form fracturing into 1,000 glittering pieces when the humans broadcast their next message, not with weapons or threats, but with music. Can you believe the audacity? What is this noise? Supreme Commander Rudel demanded, his tentacles curling in agitation, his bioluminescent patches pulsing with frantic energy. Flight of the Valkyries. I answered, recognizing the ancient human battle song, its triumphant notes echoing through the chamber like a taunt. They're broadcasting it on all frequencies while they dismantle our fleets. Apparently, they've got a sense of humor. The tactical displays painted a grim picture none of us wanted to face. The proud Drachnid Armada, once the terror of the stars, was reduced to scattering like frightened prey animals. The Commerce World's defense grid had been turned against their own ships by human cyber warfare, a betrayal of our own technology. And the Hive Cluster's mighty spawning fleets? Now drifting aimlessly in space, their crews inexplicably asleep. How could one species wield such power? How? Ambassador P's mandibles twitched uncontrollably, his voice a high-pitched whine of panic. How are they predicting our every move? I pulled up another report, a bitter laugh escaping my throat despite the gravity of it all. Remember those human servants in our diplomatic corps? The ones we dismissed as mere cheap labor? Turns out they've been cataloging our military response patterns for generations. The betrayal stung. How had we been so blind to their cunning? The chamber rocked again, the walls trembling as another battle unfolded nearby, the vibrations rattling my very bones. This time, I noticed something chilling about the human tactics. They're hurting us. I realized, my eyes widening as the pattern emerged on the display. Every retreat route leads to a prepared ambush. They mapped out this entire campaign before firing the first shot. The precision was almost beautiful, if it weren't so terrifying. Had they been planning this all along? High Chancellor Vex's scales had settled into a permanent shade of gray, his once vibrant colors dulled by dread. The combined fleet is reporting strange malfunctions. Ships shutting down, weapons failing, quantum virus. I explained, reviewing the data with a grim nod. They infected our networks years ago, lying dormant, gathering data, waiting for the signal. When New Montana burned, they activated their trap. The realization was like a cold blade to the gut. How long had they been playing us? Another alert blared, this time a message flashing across every screen in the chamber. Simple text, no audio. Check your calendars. Confusion reigned for only a moment before understanding hit like a supernova. Today's date on the human calendar, April 1st, April Fool's Day. They timed their revenge to coincide with their ancient holiday of pranks and tricks. These humans, Rudel muttered, his voice hollow. They turned war into theater. No, I corrected, my voice rising with conviction. They turned your slaughter of their people into a lesson. Look at the battle footage. Every human ship broadcasts their target's crimes before attacking. They're not just winning, they're documenting their justice. How could you not admire such resolve? The displays showed more human ships appearing from nowhere, their tactics defying every law of physics we knew. Some phased through solid matter, slipping through defenses like ghosts. Others manipulated time itself, arriving at their targets before the attacks even launched. That's impossible, a junior ambassador whispered, her voice trembling with awe. The energy requirements alone. They solved cold fusion 40 cycles ago. I revealed, savoring the shocked gasps that filled the chamber. Kept that quiet too, along with quantum tunneling, temporal mechanics, and a dozen other technologies we thought were pure fantasy. How had they kept such secrets from us? A new tactical assessment flashed across my neural link, each word a hammer blow. The Drade home fleet, the pride of their empire, had just surrendered unconditionally. The Commerce World's defense forces followed suit minutes later, their resolve crumbling like dust. The dominoes were falling exactly as humanity had planned, a cascade of defeat we couldn't stop. You know what's truly terrifying? I asked the stunned council, my voice low and heavy with foreboding. This isn't even their full force. Long-range scans suggest most of their fleet is still waiting in whatever pocket dimension they've been hiding in. The thought sent chills through me. What else were they capable of? Supreme Commander Rudel slumped in his hover seat, his tentacles limp, his spirit broken. How long have they been planning this? Since the first trade restriction, I said quietly, the weight of 300 cycles pressing down on me. Every insult, every restriction, every diplomatic slight. They remembered them all, built their response one piece at a time, created redundancies we never imagined. The meticulousness of it was staggering. Had we ever stood a chance? The chamber's main screen lit up with a new message from the human fleet, this time accompanied by another Earth song, something called the Imperial March, its ominous notes filling the air like a death knell. We're not going to win this, are we? High Chancellor Vexa asked, his voice barely a whisper, his scales pale as ash. I shook my head, my heart's heavy with the truth. Chancellor, we lost this war 300 cycles ago. We just didn't know it until today. The admission hung in the air, a bitter pill none of us wanted to swallow. 1 month after what humans now call April Fool's War, I stood in the rebuilt council chamber, the scars of conflict still fresh in my mind. The changes were stark, impossible to ignore. The Drachnid seats sat empty, their empire now under human oversight, a shadow of its former glory. The Commerce World section had been reduced to a single, lonely chair, a humbling reminder of their fall. And in the center, where the High Chancellor's grand platform once floated, stood a simple wooden podium, unassuming yet commanding in its simplicity. Admiral Mir Rodriguez stepped up to that podium, her dress uniform gleaming under the starlight, radiating a quiet confidence that filled the chamber. No weapons, no guards, just pure, unyielding resolve. "The terms are non-negotiable," she announced, her voice a striking blend of warmth and steel, cutting through the tension like a laser. "But they are, we think, fair." I watch my fellow ambassadors, their faces a mix of apprehension and curiosity, as she outlined humanity's demands. No more technology restrictions, no more artificial trade barriers, no more interference with human expansion. Simple terms that could have prevented this entire disaster if we'd offered them 3 centuries ago. Why hadn't we listened? "You're not demanding reparations?" Trade Minister Zill asked, her crystalline form still bearing stress fractures from her earlier shattering, her voice tinged with disbelief. Admiral Rodriguez smiled, not the polished, diplomatic smile we'd come to expect from humans, but a real, heartfelt one that caught us off guard. "Your functioning economies serve our interests better than your bankrupted ones. We're not here for revenge. We're here for change." The sincerity in her words was disarming. Could we trust this olive branch? Supreme Commander Rudel, now the last of the Drade High Command, raised his tentacles, his bioluminescent patches dim with defeat. "And our military forces? Will be limited to defensive capabilities only," Rodriguez replied, her tone firm but not cruel. "You can keep your patrol fleets, but the next species that launches an unprovoked attack will find their entire military infrastructure turned into a quantum physics experiment." Again, the warning was clear, and I couldn't help but notice her hand briefly touch a small medal on her chest, the New Montana Service Cross. She'd lost family there, I realized, yet here she stood, offering peace. How could she find such strength? "There's one more thing," Rodriguez continued, triggering a holographic display that lit up the chamber W. "If possibilities, we're establishing a new research initiative open to all species. No restrictions, no censorship, pure science, pure cooperation." The chamber buzzed with surprised murmurs, a flicker of hope amid the despair. High Chancellor Vex's scales shifted to a cautious green, his voice tentative. "You would share your advanced technology? Share?" "No." Rodriguez shook her head, her smile widening. "We're offering you the chance to develop it yourselves, with guidance. Think of it as a galactic scholarship program." The vision was breathtaking. They weren't building an empire. They were building a school. "The universe is bigger than our petty power games," Rodriguez continued, her voice rising with passion as she gestured to the stars visible through the chamber's crystal walls. "There are threats out there that will require all of us working together. Real threats, the kind that make our recent unpleasantness look like a children's game." Her words sent a chill through me. What could be so terrifying that it dwarfed this war? She pressed on, her gaze sweeping the chamber. "Humanity didn't develop all this technology just to win a war. We developed it because we looked into the dark between stars and saw things coming. Things that should scare you a lot more than we do." The chamber fell silent, every ambassador staring into the void, wondering what horrors humanity had glimpsed that drove them to such lengths. The weight of the unknown was suffocating. "So," Rodriguez concluded, her voice steady and resolute, "you have a choice. Join us in preparing for the real fight, or stay locked in your comfortable ignorance. But understand this, we won't let anyone hold back progress anymore. The universe doesn't care about our politics or our pride. It only respects preparation." As the Admiral stepped down from the podium, I couldn't help but laugh, a sound that drew stares from my colleagues. 300 cycles, I explained, wiping moisture from my throat's sacs, my voice thick with emotion. "We spent 300 cycles trying to contain humanity because we feared what they might become. And in doing so, we forced them to become exactly what we feared, but better than we ever imagined." The irony was almost too much to bear. Admiral Rodriguez paused on her way out, her eyes meeting mine. "You know, Ambassador KRX, there's an old human saying, be careful what you wish for, you might get it." And what did we wish for? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She smiled, that terrifyingly genuine smile that sent shivers down my spine. You wished for humanity to learn its place in the galaxy. We did. Turns out, that place is at the front of the class, teaching the rest of you how to survive what's coming. As she left, I looked around at my fellow ambassadors, seeing the same realization dawning on their faces. We tried to play teachers to humanity, never realizing we were the ones who needed schooling. The stars seemed a little darker that day, their vastness more foreboding. But for the first time in centuries, we weren't facing that darkness alone. Could we rise to the challenge humanity had set before us?